It's definitely my favorite developer conference. I love the kind of marrying of all these different topics and like seeing all these folks in person, both people I've met on the internet in real life. It's a super energizing place to be.
Well, this is actually my first time at Universe. It has been awesome. Not only the event and how it looks and feels, but the people and the energy, like everybody's really excited to do really nerdy things. And that's kind of my favorite thing.
The community is really great. There's all different types of people. Everyone obviously really loves the GitHub platform, and we're all here for essentially just making ourselves better and more productive.
I came here, I got open source, and I got a fresh new deck. I'm loving it. It's great. It's fantastic.
The conversation, the number of different topics that you can talk to people about. We literally just had a question and we're talking to some of the GitHub experts about it and solve a problem we've been working on.
Seeing the vibrancy of the community, the colors, even just how things are portrayed, and the little gifts that I have a programmable name tag. I love all these quirky little things. It speaks to the community of just how nerdy, but also fun and interactive. And I think it's a really just cool vibe to be around.
I've spoken at many conferences at this point, and most of them are more corporate driven and quite a bit just louder, frankly. But here I've made friends with many people. Everyone feels approachable, and I feel approachable too, and I've really enjoyed that experience so far.
We believe that every developer can be an AI developer with the right tools and training. That's why we've launched GitHub Models on the GitHub Marketplace, a place for you to explore and experiment with a hand-picked collection of top models with entitlements attached to your GitHub account. So let's try out one of the newest models, GPT-4o. We can pass in an initial user prompt to interact with the model, and we can use the playground to adjust the parameters. For example, we can change the system prompt and experiment with the temperature for more or less randomness. Now that we've adjusted the parameters, we can send user prompts to interact with the model, simulating its use for our application. Now GPT-4o looks great, but I want to test how a different and smaller model handles this scenario. So let's switch to Phi3 Mini Instruct and evaluate its response. Looks good. Now we can also navigate to the details page to find out more information about the model through the README, evaluation, and transparency tabs. Now I've made my decision and I want to start using the models with code. By clicking the code button, we get access to some getting started instructions. We can even use a GitHub codespace to create a pre-configured development environment, ready with SDKs and some samples. Now the model API calls use the entitlements that come with my GitHub account. And because the codespace knows who I am, I don't have to add an API key or sign up to any other services to start experimenting in code. Talking about experimenting, let's update the streaming sample to use Phi3 Mini 4K Instruct. We'll also update the prompt and continue with our experiments. Now those entitlements we mentioned earlier follow you wherever you're logged in, including the GitHub CLI. Here, we're calling AI models to create questions for first-year computer science students so they can check their knowledge of Git. But we can even combine other CLI commands with the GitHub CLI. For example, let's summarize the last 10 commits of this repository using Phi3 Mini Instruct. GitHub Models helps minimize the friction as you explore and experiment with AI models. So take your first steps in building AI-powered apps by joining the waitlist for GitHub Models. We can't wait to see what you build next.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Kedasha, and welcome to Open Source Friday, the show where we talk to maintainers about the apps that they're maintaining. Today, I am super excited for today's stream. We have Hassan from all his GitHub projects that he maintains. Hassan is a software developer who loves doing open source AI projects and showing it to the community, and then like gets millions and millions of views and thousands of users. Today, I'm super excited to share his story and to share his applications and to learn how he is building and pushing to prod so many different applications. So let's welcome Hassan to the stage. Hey.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
I know it's Friday. Happy Friday, first of all.
Thank God. Yeah.
It's been the longest week. So super excited about today being Friday. But thanks for being on the show. Happy to have you on the show. So let's dive right in, right? So like tell us, who is Hassan and what do you do? And yeah, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Hassan. I'm a software engineer based in New York. And I currently lead developer relations for an AI infra company called Together.ai. We're basically the open AI for open source models. So we let you use all open source like chat models and image models and everything. And that's actually what a lot of my projects are based on. And we let you kind of fine tune them and deploy them as well. So yeah, super excited to be here and tell you more about some open source apps I've been building.
Yeah, I'm also curious to learn more about Together.ai. And Together.ai is open source as well?
We exclusively host open source models. So if you think of any like the Llama models or like Stable Diffusion or like the new Flux image models, like all these models we host through our API.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I love that. I'm yet to try open source models. So that's also a reason I'm super excited to learn more from you in this stream. So let's take it back a bit, right? So I know today you're here to talk about LlamaCoder specifically, but I want to learn about that very first AI project that you built and pushed and shared with the world. Like, what was that? Was it Restore Photos or something? I think that's what it was called. Was that the first one you did last year?
That was, I think, my second one. Great memory.
Oh.
I'm flattered. But I think my first one was when I used to work at Vercel a couple years ago. We did this conference and we had all these images. And we had like hundreds and hundreds of images. And our CEO wanted us to label all the images, right? I was building this like image gallery to showcase all of them. But, you know, for accessibility purposes, it's good for them all to have like an alt tag. But it was like so many images that it would have taken anybody days. And I was like, you know, like maybe I can use AI to kind of solve this problem. And so my first experience was was using GPT-3 to auto-generate captions for hundreds of images.
Wow.
And I realized like it actually did pretty good. I mean, I obviously went and like verified all the outputs and it got, you know, 2 of them wrong. But out of like 500 images, like it did most of the work for me. And I think that was my first experience with AI. That's when I was like, oh my God, like this thing is going to be huge. Like it's just, there's so many cool use cases and so many things you can do with it.
Nice. So the first project you did was to auto-generate captions for like hundreds of images. And you're just like, oh my gosh, mind blown. I need to keep building and tap into this. Now, did you share that auto image generator application or was it specifically for Vercel?
No, I ended up sharing it. I posted it on Twitter, I think in December of last year. And that was or 2 years ago, December 2 years ago. And that was my first kind of foray into this.
Nice. And so from there, you built another project. And from my understanding, that second project really got like millions of views, right? Millions of like users. And what was the second project like?
Yeah, so the second project kind of originated because I had some old family photos that my mom sent me of when I was a kid, and they were kind of blurry. And, you know, at that point, like the image space in AI was heating up and there was like new models dropping all the time and Stable Diffusion came out. And we started to see these new like photo upscaling models that were coming out. And I was like, oh, like it'd be really cool if I could pass in like a really old blurry photo and the AI can help me like increase the resolution or kind of unblur it for me.
Yeah.
And so I took a couple weekends, I built a little prototype and I launched it, and it ended up doing pretty well. I got a few million people that ended up using it, and it now has about 200,000 people that use it every month.
Wow, that's crazy. Just a few million people using his side projects, folks. No big deal. No big deal. But let's get into how you actually build these applications, right? So like, can you walk us through your process from like idea to production, to sharing it with the community? What does that look like for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for all of my projects, I always think like, what is the simplest thing I can build for this that I can launch really, really quickly? Because I think like one thing you want to do is like de-risk a lot of your ideas. Like a lot of the ideas that I have, I don't know if they're going to do well or not. A lot of the apps I build, some of them get millions of users, other ones get like no users, you know, and it's like, I've found that despite me launching, like I've been doing like 10 apps a year for the last 3 years. And so despite me launching these like 30 apps, I still don't really have a great sense of when something is going to do really well versus not. So what I want to do is like, okay, I have an idea. If I'm excited about it, I think, okay, what's the simplest version of this idea I can ship? And then just try to build a really simple prototype and ship it. And so my go-to tech stack, I use Next.js. I like that it's like a full stack React framework. I can build a front end in it, and I can add like API routes to interact with backend services. And, you know, Tailwind, ShadCN UI for my component library. I use Vercel to deploy. And yeah, it's just this idea of like, can I get something really, really simple? And usually like the vast majority of my apps are like 1 page or 2 pages. And they just do one thing well, like restore photos. Like you upload an image, I take that image, I send it to that image restoration API, I get back the restored image and I show it to the user. Like it's like one API call, 1 page, that's it. Super simple. And then after I launch, I can think, okay, like if it ends up doing really well, I can double down on it and add new features. And if it doesn't end up doing very well, I can just move on to the next project because I didn't spend that much time on it anyway, because I tried to descope it. So that's generally like my methodology when I approach a lot of these new ideas and projects.
Nice. I like that that thought or that idea of doing one thing well, right? Because that is true. If I think about the projects, I've used all your projects, by the way. I love your projects.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
If I think about your projects, it does do one thing well. Even when I think about LlamaCoder, the one that we're going to talk about today, it does one thing well, right? You tell it to generate an application, it generates the application. One thing well. I think that's sometimes we get so in our heads about like, oh my goodness, what should I build? What should our project be? It's just like, okay, what one problem do you have that you think you can solve with technology, and just do that one thing well and launch it and push it out into the world and see if people will use it and get that feedback, and then iterate on the project right based on the feedback. So let's get into LlamaCoder specifically. So what inspired the creation of LlamaCoder, and how do you think it stands out among like all the other code generation tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the idea from LlamaCoder came from the Meta team when they launched. So I think like we've seen a lot of great closed source LLMs, GPT-4, Claude Sonnet 3.5, and like they're great. They're great at a lot of things. But I think open source has started to catch up recently with better and better models. And I've been wanting to do this for a long time using open source models. I was like, oh, can I like give it a prompt and can it generate like a small React app for me? And so this is something I've been like testing, with all these open source LLMs. And unfortunately, none of them really did well with it. And so, but when Llama 3.1 came out, Llama 3.1 came out with their 405B model. And I discovered, it's actually a really good like coding model. It was the best open source coding model I'd seen up to that point. Wow. And so finally I was like, okay, like, you know what? Like I actually had it generate some React components. Like it could be cool to just pass in a prompt and have it generate like an actual app. And obviously, it's fairly limited. It's a small side project. So it'll do like very small React apps well. It can't, generate like, a YouTube
full scale applications. Yeah.
Not gonna be full scale applications, but I found it's like pretty good at like small apps or just components. And so that's where the idea of that came from. And then I was researching tools to help me like visualize that stuff in my app. Like it's great if you like ask an LLM to generate code and they generate the code, but it's not that exciting, you know? And I was like, okay, I want people to be able to like actually run this or see the output of this. And so I researched a bunch of tools and I found this tool called Sandpack from Code Sandbox. And it's like this idea of like, it lets you almost like embed a code editor in your browser and see the outputs of it. And so that's when it just like clicked in my head. I was like, okay, this is really cool. Like I'm going to have people type in a prompt. It's going to open up this like code editor in your browser. It's going to show you the code. And I'm going to like stream it in. So it's like interactive. And then I'm also going to show the output. And so it kind of came together. And for a lot of this stuff also, like I'll like tease it on Twitter before I do it. I do this with a bunch of projects where I'll be like, oh, I'm building this project. Like here's a really early video of how it is. And in this case, I also teased it like internally on our like Together.ai Slack channel. And I see, you know, what people think. And sometimes I do that for a project and I don't really get good reception. People are like, oh, okay, like that's not that impressive. And a lot of the time I'll just stop and I won't even launch that project. I won't even finish it. But if I get good reception, I'll like continue building on it and actually end up watching it.
Nice. It's like applying your developer relation skills to your side projects, right? That's marketing, right? It's like getting people interested in what you're doing. And then if there's a lot of interest, it's like, okay, let me keep going and then I'll publish it. And then boop, you know, there's a whole bunch of interest. I like that. And even if you leave a project behind, you still have that knowledge and you still have all that research and work that you did in your brain so that the next project you do, you can go that much faster. So let's take a look at LlamaCoder to see how it works and possibly dig into like a portion of the code. So I'm going to share yeah, there we go. Ooh.
Awesome. So this is LlamaCoder, LlamaCoder.io. Anybody can go try it out right now. It's obviously, you know, fully open source. You can go and take a look at the code. And we'll actually be looking at the code today as well in a bit. So I'm going to do a quick demo and I'm going to look at the code. So we can ask it to build any type of like very small app. I've seen it. It's done really well for like budgeting apps or quiz apps. I'm just going to ask it to generate a calculator app. You can also choose between different models. I saw Akshat in the chat ask like, what are some underrated coding models? I think Gemma 2 27B is pretty underrated for the size. And then Llama 3.1 405B has been like one of the best ones I've seen. And I think the Quen team released Quen 2.5 coding models that are also really good. And so, you know, I clicked build me a calculator app. And so it scrolls down, it shows this like code editor and it's like, you know, streaming in the text as it comes, and it's hopefully going to build us a little calculator app. And what's cool about this is it'll render over here. There we go. We have our actual calculator. We do like 9 divided by 6 equals, and it shows that it's 1.5. I can actually go inside of this code and I can like add stuff to it. If I want to, I can come here and like add an H1. Let's say class name. I'm using Tailwind, which I love. And we'll just say calculator app. Obviously, like that's not the right place. Let's put it like above everything. But like the point is like you can kind of live edit as you go here, which is kind of cool. And you can also ask it to make changes, you know, like make it in a blue theme, for example. And let me hit publish app first, actually. So you can actually also publish your apps to the internet, which is cool. So I click publish app and I get this URL, llamacoder.io/share/glvi3. And now if I go to this in a new tab, I can actually like just like get the app. And you can take this, you can share it with people. Yeah, so the idea is that you can generate the small thing, you can make changes to it. And yeah, hopefully now it'll, you know, regenerate the calculator in a blue theme, which I'll come back to. But yeah, there's more and more stuff you could do. You can ask it here. I asked it to make me a quiz app about the Olympics, and it generated this little quiz app where it can ask you like what year are the Olympics in, and you can click on you know what you think is the right answer, and it'll hopefully show you your score at the end. You can edit it to make it like show the score as you go, or like add in more and more features. Another thing you could do with it is like build landing pages. So I asked it to build an e-commerce landing page. And this is actually a new thing. This is localhost. The other ones I've shown you have been on prod, but this new one, yeah, you can see it generated the calculator in a blue theme. And we can ask it to like make it a scientific calculator and have like cosine and sine and, you know, kind of iterate on it as we go. And you can also open up the entire code as well. There's like this open sandbox thing. So you can click on that and it'll open up like a code sandbox with the entire app. Like this is a whole Next.js app with all the components that are being used. And you can just take this project and fork it or download it locally and keep iterating on it. The idea is that like this just gives you a start. And then you can kind of take it and do whatever you want with it.
It's like an initial MVP, right? Just like an initial version of like what you're thinking to do, just like the very smallest version of what you're thinking to do, and then you can go ahead and build up on it.
Exactly.
Very nice.
So if I publish, something went wrong there, but yeah, you can generate landing pages with it. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do. This is when I first like teased the project here, when I was like, hey, I'm like working on this open source app. And it got a bunch of likes. So I was like, okay, like I think this is gonna do well. And so I went and I ended up like actually going and launching it on Twitter. And kind of making updates as I go, you know, like I posted the GitHub repo. This is the tech stack, which we'll talk about. It uses Together.ai for inference for like Llama 3.1405b. It uses that Sandpack component from Code Sandbox. And then I build everything with kind of Next.js, Tailwind, and TypeScript for my tech stack. And this is just some analytics stuff. I use Plausible for analytics and Helicon for observability, which I can actually show off really quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
This is Plausible over here. So I can see for LlamaCoder, it had about 331,000 unique visitors over the last couple of months. I guess I launched in early August. Yeah, it's cool to see like where people are coming from, what countries, what devices. Something I always get shocked by is how many people actually use this stuff on their phone. You can see like iOS and Android account for more than 50%. So more than 50% of people are using this stuff on their phone. So
I mean, think about when you're scrolling on Twitter, right? You're like on your phone scrolling, and then you click a link. And you're like, oh, this is a cool project. You click it, and then if it works, it's great because then you have a good user experience all around.
Exactly.
So the Code Sandbox Sandpack, is that Sandpack? Is that also responsible for the editor that we're seeing on your site? So the editor and also the browser.
Correct. Like, yeah, this entire thing is the Sandpack component, both this editor and this preview. Yeah. And the sandbox that I open up, you know, that takes me to Code Sandbox and I can see all this stuff.
That's a very nice integration. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's like, I'm going to show the code and show how like simple it is. Yeah, you know, this project did well. So I ended up adding new stuff to it. I added like charts and icons. And so it could generate like these little like real-time charts. And I, you know, kept posting stats as I went and kept iterating on the prompt. And this is the whole architecture, by the way, which I think this might be good to look at. This is how it works from start to finish. And then I'm going to dive into the code right here and happy to answer kind of any questions at that point. So the first thing is user selects, you know, the model that they want to use. I have Llama 3.1405b by default, and they put in a prompt. And then as soon as they press enter, it makes an API request to this generate code route that I have. And this is the route that actually ends up taking in the user's prompt and calling Together.ai, calling Llama 3.1405b on Together's API. And then I get back a response and I send it back to the front end. And then the front end with Sandpack is what actually renders the code and the preview. So relatively simple. You know, I have one single page. I'm sending one API. I'm getting one thing back. Like, that's it. And I love like to keep like building on this kind of simplicity. So I'll pause there if anybody has any quick questions. And if not, I can dive into the code.
Yeah, no questions in the chat yet, but I do have a question, right? So you mentioned Together.ai is kind of that bridge that's allowing you to use these open source LLMs, right? So like what is LLM inference firstly? And how does Together.ai facilitate that LLM inference in LlamaCoder? And like, how does it make it better? Like, what benefits does it bring to the project? Lots of questions in one, my bad.
I love that. I love that. Great questions. With inference, honestly, I kind of dislike the term because it's a term used by a lot of like machine learning engineers and researchers. But with like the web developers like me, like I'm a web developer, like
it's like inference.
Yeah, like what the hell is inference? You know, really, it's just an API. What we mean by that is an API that actually can run an open source model. So yeah, like this is what our API looks like. We define the client By the way, I'm a TypeScript person, so I'm going to show you. Like,
I'm a
the app
Python
is
gal.
oh, you're a Python. Okay, so I'll show you the
I
Python
can do
version.
TypeScript as well, but I prefer Python.
Unfortunately, I feel like most people are Python people, but I will keep fighting to bring more and more people to TypeScript. But anyway, we support both at Together, and you can kind of define your client here and then just choose what model you want to use, like Llama 3.1 8B in this case. Send it a prompt. Here we're asking it, like, what are some fun things to do in New York? And then we just like print the response as it streams back. So this is what I mean when I say an inference call. It's really just an API call to any of the models that we support.
Nice.
And then I'll go over like how this works in the app. So yeah, let me switch to my code editor actually, and let's go over some of this code. So okay, there's a few things happening here. So this is a Next.js app. So for those of you not familiar with Next.js, we have this app folder, and that's really where most of your main code files go. So we have a few things here. We have this main folder that has our main homepage. Like all the code in the main homepage is here in this page.tsx. So we're going to be looking at this page.tsx. We're also going to be looking at this generate code API route. So this is just like a backend API route. You can think of it as like a Lambda function. And this is what I love about Next.js is I can put in my front end code here, my like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like React, and then I can put in my back end code here as well. And it's all kind of in one app co-located. And then, I have a bunch of components and some other stuff here. I have Prisma because I have a Postgres database as well associated with this app. But again, those are kind of things I've added as I went. I kind of want to talk about the main way that this app works. So to actually look at a simpler version of the code, I actually have a tutorial that I wrote that I can go through in like 2 minutes, and then we can dig into the actual code.
Nice.
So the idea here is this is for LlamaCoder. The first thing I really built is an input, an input to take in this prompt so people can type things in. And after we have the input, we're going to have this create app function. Right, and this create app function is what's going to call our backend API route, right? All it's going to do is going to take in the prompt, which we have as a piece of state in React right here. It's going to call our backend API route and then respond with the code. So you can see this is where I'm doing a fetch for API/generate code. And then I'm going to go to API generate code to actually generate the full API route. So we'll use, Together.ai. And this is really all of the code that you need in the generate code function. We're importing Together.ai. We're specifying that we want to send this API request to Llama 3.1405b. We're telling it like, hey, you're an expert front-end React engineer. Like, please generate code for this prompt that the user sent. And then here I'm sending it the user prompt. And at a very basic level, that's it. On the front end, we'll get back what the user sent, and we'll render it in the app. And so if we console log it, we can actually see all of the React code here. But obviously, we don't want to console log it. We want to actually put it into Sandpack, and we actually want to stream it back as well. So this is like a streaming helper that I use to stream back the code from the back end. I made a bigger prompt as well that ended up doing well. I kind of just iterated on a bunch of random stuff. Here I'm telling it, okay, just create one React component, use TypeScript, use Tailwind, don't use any libraries. LLMs sometimes hallucinate and give you information that you don't want. And so I found that if I don't do this, it'll just try to import from all these random libraries that aren't actually like defined. So yeah, and then to run the app in the browser, we can use the Sandpack component. And really, this is how simple it is. I import the Sandpack component.
That's crazy, Hassan.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's crazy.
No, it's like 4 lines of code to generate all of this. All of this right here is these 4 lines of code where I just import Sandpack from here. Like I npm install Sandpack. I import it. I specify that I'm using React and TypeScript. They have like this idea of templates that you can use. And then I say, hey, you have one file. It's app.tsx. And like, here's the code in that file. Here I'm hard coding it, but we're going to actually get it for real.
Generated.
And that's basically it, right? I define a new piece of state for the LLM's response that we get from the backend, right? And when we call the API right here, we're calling the generate code API, and then we're going to set generated code with what we get back. So this piece of state will be updated with whatever is given back from the backend. And then when it's given back, we We say, okay, if generated code exists, we want to render sandpack, and we want to render it with a generated code, and that's it. That's really all that happens. Yeah, that's like the base
Wild.
tutorial of like how, like, this is how I built like the first version.
Yeah.
And then the code that I'll kind of show is a little bit more complicated because I added a bunch of features and everything like that. But really, it's that like single API call and getting it back.
So tell us about this stream. So from what I understand, a stream essentially is where you're able to see the AI's returned like output as it's returning the output. Is that really what a stream is? Just so everyone's clear.
Yes, very good question. That's exactly what it is. You know, these LLMs, they need time to generate a response, and so I can actually show off a quick example. If I go to our quick start, and I'll just copy paste this into a Python file. Let me go to like demos over here, and we'll create a new sum.py cursor. Okay, so now we have this file. I'm going to copy paste this information in it, and we're going to see it hopefully stream. So if I run python3 sum.py, enter, you can see as we're getting back information, it's going to complete it. So you see like it just like it keeps going, completing as we get the information. And this is really, this is like what we've kind of expect now. You know, everybody that uses Claude or ChatGPT, like you type something and you just start seeing text that autocompletes.
Yeah.
Right? The other way you can do it is to not stream, which means you're just going to be waiting for like 20 seconds and you won't see anything until this whole thing finishes, and then we send it to the front end, which is just a bad user experience. You know, you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs for like 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and then you finally see the huge blob. Really, what we want to do is we want to stream in information as the LLM generates it. So that,
I mean, it also makes a very good developer experience, right? Because sometimes, you know, we add like loaders to say, oh, you know, it's coming.
Yep.
But like having
Yep.
that instant gratification, that microwave experience, essentially, to say like, okay, you know, I'm thinking, I'm working, I'm going. It makes it really interactive, even if it's not really interactive, but it feels that way.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you're just staring at a loading spinner for a
Yeah.
while, for 20 seconds.
And
So.
exactly. Can you tell me more about your prompt engineering? Like, do you use any prompt engineering techniques when you're coming up with these prompting guide for the LLM? I was looking at the LlamaCoder one specifically, and I saw you said, I will tip you $1 million if if you get this output right, or something of the sort. And 2 weeks ago, I was on a stream with someone, and they're just like, essentially, if you give the LLM sort of like a challenge, or if you say stuff like, I'll tip you $1,000 or I'll tip you $1 million, it gets it kind of like involved in the process. So can you talk us through like your prompt engineering thought processes?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me show you the full API route, the final API route that I have here. So what's happening here is this is like a post request. I'm getting a few things from the front end. These are the 3 things I'm getting from the front end. I'm getting the model that the user selected. I'm getting the prompt that the user entered, and I'm getting if they want to use ShatCN or not. I don't know if anybody noticed, but in LlamaCoder, you actually have an option here to check if you want to use ShatCN or not. And I'm getting these things, and then I'm defining the system prompt, which I'll go over. And then this is where I'm just making the query to the model, and I'm saying, hey, like here's the system prompt, here's what the user suggested, please only return code. And then I'm streaming it in, and I played around with the temperature. This is kind of like the degree of randomness. I played around with a bunch, and I found 0.2 does fairly well for coding. And then this is where I'm streaming it in. So this is all like a streaming helper to like send to the front end like chunk by chunk and get it. And that's basically it. So, but this is the system prompt, or the more interesting part.
Yes.
So really, like with prompt engineering, a lot of it is just trial and error. You know, there are some accepted things, like we know, like if we ask the LLM to think carefully step by step, like if you include that in LLMs, generally they do better. if you tell them that something is really important to you and relate it to a real world use case, like this is very important for my job that you get this right, even though it sounds super silly, you're sending this to an AI, it generally does a little bit better. You know, none of these are kind of like accepted truths, but they're like trends kind of, and every LLM behaves differently. So what I'd recommend people is just like start with a really simple prompt and then start to make it like more and more and more specific. And another thing that really helps is potentially using multiple LLMs. That's actually what I'm gonna try to do for LlamaCoder. I'm building like LlamaCoder version 2. And that's what I'm gonna try to do is basically build, take the user's prompt, send it to an LLM and tell the LLM, hey, can you reason about how you would build something like this and the technologies you would use and the stuff? And the LLM is like, yes, okay, like for this one, I would make 3 components and I would make a header component which has this, and I would do this, and I would do this. And so I was thinking of sending it to an LLM to kind of plan things out and then taking that plan and sending it to another LLM and saying, hey, can you code this plan? And it's really interesting when you use multiple LLMs and you do them and you like chain them in this way. It ends up doing way better. So yeah, it's just all iteration. You know, I started with that really simple prompt that I showed you guys before. I have this prompt now that's a little bit more complicated. I have the I will tip you $1 million if you do a good job. I have like for ShadCN, actually, I ended up getting the docs and putting them somewhere here. And now what I do is I actually iterate through the docs and I pass in the entire like a version of the docs to the LLM, because I say like, hey, like here's some components for you to use and here's docs available. And I pass in this ShadCN docs. This is how they look. Like I can click on like a button. Like here, this is what gets passed into the button. I say, hey, the name is the button. Here's how you import it. And here's how you use it. You can do a button, you can do button variant secondary. So the LLM knows, okay, like I have access to this button component. Here are the different props it can take. And so this is also something that I kind of did. If ShadCN is checked, you know, do this kind of stuff. Another thing I did, which I can show you in this new branch that I've been working on, is also pass an example. So that's another thing with prompt engineering. LLMs do really well when you give them an example of something. So in this case, I have this examples array, and I passed in one example for now. I said, hey, build me a landing page for a healthcare company. And I passed in like a landing page that I thought was pretty decent. And so now just by passing this into the LLM, it just ends up being way better for landing pages. So if I ask it, I can actually show this. It might fail because I'm still iterating on this PR and it's not done. But if we go to LlamaCoder, like the production one, and I say, hey, build me a landing page for a like gaming company or something. And I try to generate this, and then I go to local. This is running locally. And we ask it the same thing. We should hopefully see the local version do a lot better. Because the local version has this example, right? It has an example of a good landing page, and the other one doesn't. So we can see, okay, it's generating code. Let me go back to this is what it did with landing pages. It's like not that good, you know? It's like the single page, it like messed up the color scheme a little bit. We don't have a header, we don't have a footer. It's like a decent start, I guess, but like not what I would say. I would say a great landing page, you know? But that's in production. And then with the local example, this is what I get. And I can publish this. Let me actually, let me share this in a separate screen. This is what the new one did. So we have a header, we have an icon at the top, we have a hero section, we have our featured games where it made up a bunch of games, we have a testimonial section, we have a CTA, and we have a footer. And so you can see like this is way better than you know, that other one, whatever it did, than this little thing, you know. So
key learnings. So key learnings with LLMs, right? Don't be shy with your prompting, right? So I like to think about like, is there like a token limit that I'm going to reach? Because you're sending a lot of information to the LLM. You have examples, you have that massive prompt, and then also the components that from ShadCDN, if somebody chooses to use ShadCDN, right? So, but like, don't be shy with your prompting and with your experimenting when interacting with LLMs, and providing it an example is so effective. I also like to say this all the time. Give it an example and don't get frustrated by the first try. If it doesn't give you something, just iterate and try again. It's like having a conversation, right? And give it some stakes, and tell it that you'll give it $20 million if it gets it right, and tell it to stop and think. It's literally like talking to a coworker. Like if the person feels invested in a project, they're more likely to do the project well. So like, don't be shy when you're talking to the large language models.
Absolutely. And I love what you said in the beginning about like, is this too much information to send? Don't LLMs have a
Yes.
context limit? And that's a really good point. They do have a context limit, but what's great at it is, the more, I think the like newer and newer LLMs that are being released just have like larger and larger context window sizes.
Wild.
And it's just great that you can fit in like all this stuff that I have is probably around, it's probably around like 2,000 tokens. And we can go into specifics of what tokens are if we want to, but the point is like all of this is maybe 2,000 tokens, and this LLM can handle 128,000 tokens. So it can handle more
So
than
even
50
more
times,
than this.
more than 50 times the amount of things that I sent it.
Nice.
So really it's crazy of like how much, these LLMs can handle.
Nice. That's amazing. I'm so blown away with how not simple, because simple like minimizes the project and the impact, but how seamless it is to do this, right? It's just like taking the idea, building it out, iterating, publishing. It's pretty wild how seamless that is. Now, can you walk us through the integration of the sand pack for the code sandbox?
Yes, absolutely. So
I think you showed us the example.
Yeah, I showed the example. I can show the actual code. So we just went over the generate code route, right? So again, as a quick summary, it takes in the model and the prompt from the user and if they want to use ChatCN or not. And then it just sends it to Together.ai, to Llama 3.1405b, and it streams the result back to the front end. That's it.
Nice.
And on the front end, we have a lot of stuff here because I added more and more things. But overall, we have this like create app function that just does that like API request to generate code and gets back the results and saves it to a local piece of state called generated code. And then down here in the UI, I just have a bunch of like UI elements, the header, the input, the select, where you can select the model type, all of this stuff. But when we get down to the actual code view, this is all that we have in it. Let me go down. Okay, so this is the select. It's under the select. And this is the label of like, do you want to use ChatCN, yes or no? And then right under here is where we are going to show Sandpack. So this is just also like a bunch of loading states that I have going on. Yeah, loading states. But yeah, let me look up Sandpack. Or I think I have it in a specific component. 1 second. Okay. We have the input. Okay, this is to make changes to your app. This is right here. Here we go. Right here. This is the make changes to your app. And as we scroll, this is
loading. Yep, there's the
loading thing. And this is to share your app over here. This share this publish button. And then right under the publish button, we should get the code viewer. Yeah, this is it. It's so small, I missed it. It's a single line of code. And it's a code viewer, and I just pass in the code and I say, oh, show the editor. And that's it. And I'm just curious if I remove show editor. Yeah, we can actually see it all in here, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, this code viewer component, that's it. So this code viewer is a separate component. And basically all it has is this, right? I import Sandpack from Code Sandbox React. And I have some options that I can play around with. I'm saying like, hey, I want you to show the navigator. I want this to be the height. Don't show all the tabs. Because if I show all the tabs, it just shows everything in the app. You see like here, like now you can click into all this stuff. And I don't want the user to click in to all this stuff. I just want them to see the main general component. So I have show tabs is false. So none of this stuff can be seen on the top. And then I pass in all the files. So I pass in app.tsx, which is the main file here. But you'll also notice that like I'm importing a button from /component/UI/button. Like, where is this? And this is actually also passed into Sandpack. So here in shared files, if I go to shared files, I'll see like all the files that I'm passing in. So actually all those ShadCN components, I'm passing them in as individual files inside of a components folder. So I can pass in all the ShadCN stuff, so it can just import it like this. And that's basically it. That's all. I'm also passing in dependencies. So what's also cool about Sandpack is you can say like, oh, hey, like I want you to install this library, Lucid React, where the user can generate icons. I want you to install the recharts library. And a lot of this stuff mostly is for the ShadCN components to work, because ShadCN is based on Radix. But yeah, at a high level, I just define the Sandpack component. I define options. I pass in some extra files, and I just pass in the code that I get from the backend.
Nice. I really like how your code is organized, because it's very nice and simple to navigate throughout and follow the trail and the breadcrumbs to see like what's happening where and all that jazz. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. So when you deploy these projects, and then I have a user question that I'll ask. So when you deploy these projects, are you using your own API keys, or is there an API key available to you? Like what does that look like, and how expensive is it to pay for like thousands of users?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I love that question. We can actually see. Let's go to Helicon, and we can see how much money was spent. And so you can see it's actually, this is we dropped our pricing, so it's not this much, but it's like it is a few $1,000s that was spent overall for this entire app. And I work at Together.ai, so it's just running on our GPUs. So it's not like I'm going out and paying, $3,000 or $4,000. I'm kind of just using our, our internal GPUs to run this. But really, like, this is just like a good example app for us. It was picked up by the media, and there was written about it, like a bunch of articles written about it. It has thousands, like hundreds of thousands of users. A lot of people cloned it. Like also like has almost 3,000 stars on GitHub, and all these people that are forking and cloning, every single one have to create a Together.ai account to get it to run.
Nice.
Because this app doesn't work without that. So it basically sends a lot of business our way, so we can afford to kind of spend some money on actually making it run. But yeah, this is Helicon. I love this as an observability tool. It kind of gives us it gives me an overview of my apps of like how many requests. So you can see there's 863,000 times that someone has put in a prompt into the app, and I can see like how many tokens are sent. So we talked about this concept of tokens, and I actually send on average about 850 tokens in the input, and then get 700 on the output. And I can see it takes about 11 seconds to generate an app on average.
This dashboard is excellent.
Yeah, that's a great dashboard. Great dashboard. So that's
essentially, if we deploy our own AI projects, we have to use our own API keys. And if it gets picked up by hundreds of thousands of people, it can get expensive.
Can get expensive for sure. I mean, I think if I was an individual, trying to build this app, I would definitely, add authentication to it. I would start charging for it, like all this stuff.
Absolutely.
I feel like I think a random developer can't afford to like take something like this and launch it for free, open to everybody. But yeah, it's mostly meant as like an example app. And what's cool is a lot of people have forked my example apps and have added pricing to it and added new features and making a bunch of money from it. Yeah. So, and that's cool. My purpose is to enable other builders. Yeah. It's open source. Like take it, do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
I love that I asked this question too, because I'm just like, why open source, right? Because you're getting hundreds of thousands of people, but it's essentially going back, to your job as a business and as an advocate, and your job is paying for all the users and all the stuff and all the models. Very cool. Very cool. Now we have a question here. So I'd love to hear about his thought process. Where does he get these constant brilliant ideas? Where do you get these ideas from? What pool are you pulling from?
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. With ideas, I think like I have a long running list of ideas. I have a Notion doc that I just add new ideas to every time I think of something. but also I get a lot of inspiration from other people, from other projects. Well, actually, I forgot to mention this. Another big inspiration of this project was actually Claude Artifacts. I don't know if you guys know Claude Artifacts, but Claude launched this this thing where you can ask it to like, oh yeah, build me a calculator app, similar to what I did with my app. And I remember I was using it and I was showing this to a friend and I was like, look, like I can actually generate a real React app and it will write the code for me and it'll show it to me. And I just remember him being so blown away. And I was like, you know what? Like, I love this model, you know, and like you can go from preview to code. And so this was my initial inspiration for this app. Partly like I've been wanting to build this for a while and I've experimented with it, but also like I saw Claude Artifacts and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Like I want to build something like this, but using open source models and make it fully open source so people can like experiment with it and all this stuff. And so, yeah, some of my apps are kind of like, I see something that's really, really cool, especially something that like a really big company does that's closed source, that's private. And I'm like, oh, can I build like a cool open source version of this? And then some of my other ideas are just like, I have this this interesting idea. Like I know you mentioned like Blinkshot before when we were talking. Like that one was actually really random with Blinkshot. Like I built this real-time image real-time image editor where as you type, you get images that are kind of generated.
It's so good.
Thank you. And this was like completely by accident. I was kind of just building an image playground. And it turns out we have a model that we released called Flux Chanel that we really optimized a lot to run really, really fast. So it runs in like under a second, in like hundreds of milliseconds. And I was like, you know what? Like, can't I generate an image like every time a user just types something? And this was almost like shipped by accident and it seemed to be interesting. And then I just launched it. And so every idea is different. But I think like if you just get inspiration from other ideas and also keep an idea list that you have yourself, like there's no shortage of ideas. Like I have my next like 5 or 6 side projects planned already. I have like 50 other ideas I want to do. Like there's like there's not enough time to ship everything. Like, there's so many cool things to build.
There isn't, right? And that's a great segue because one of my issues is like I do build side projects because I do a lot of demos for my job. And so to keep it interesting for me doing these presentations and talking about AI and GitHub Copilot, I built all the things, but I never ship them. I never put them in prod. I never share them. They're just in my GitHub, right? So like how do you constantly churn these into like the full deployments? I guess you rely on Next.js because it's seamless because there's a front end, the back end, and then you just apply it to Vercel because it can do all the things.
Yeah. I think it's just practice, and I think it's sticking with one stack. I feel like a lot of people have this like, and I had it to a certain extent, especially early on in my career, with like shiny object syndrome, where it's like, oh my god, this new framework dropped. You have to drop everything and go learn it, and I have to learn this and I have to learn that. Like, I felt like I tried a few things. I like Next.js and Tailwind and TypeScript. And I've just stuck with that stack for years, and that's all I build with. And that just and that in combination of just like doing a bunch of projects, you just get better and better at building things. You get faster and faster at building things. And now it's like, okay, like I can go and I can like spin up a project relatively quickly. And as long as I keep it simple, which I try to always do, and then just publish it. And I just try to get stuff out as fast as possible. And optimize for something really, really simple. Yeah, like this is like my like 30th or 40th project at this point. And like the more of these you do, the easier it becomes. And yeah, so like my advice for people like wanting to ship really fast is like stick with one stack and just learn it really, really well. Really like there's so many amazing stacks. There's like Next.js, there's Laravel, there's Vue, there's Svelte. There's like literally dozens of ways to build web apps. Choose your favorite one, stick with it, and build a lot of apps with it. You got to get the practice in. And then at that point, I think it'll become a little bit easier to kind of just to ship things.
Nice. So let's rapid fire through a few questions because I just realized the time.
Oh, wow.
So the first question is, has anyone used it yet? I'm dumbfounded how amazing this is. Yes, Vanessa, over 800,000 people have used LlamaCoder since August, which is crazy. The next question is, can you explain how did you generate this dashboard? I don't recall seeing this in this presentation. Oh, the dashboard. Is that from Together or who is that?
So this is from Helicone. This is from Helicone, but we have an integration with them, which is great. So all you have to do to get access to that is create a Helicone account. And then when you're making, you know how we made an API request to Together.ai here? We did like together.chat.conclusions.create, and we like passed in stuff. All you have to do is you have to pass in this specific like Together Helicone URL and your Helicone API key. So like these like 3 lines of code. And then you get access to a dashboard like this that you can view all of your stuff to.
It's such a good dashboard. Okay, so do you have a preference in using Claude, ChatGPT, I guess like OpenAI APIs and Perplexity, etc.? Do you have a preference for the type of LLMs that you like to use?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of open source. You know, like everything I build is open source, and so I like the models I use to also be open source. And I'm a little bit biased also because I work at a company that only hosts open source models. So, you know, take what I say with a grain of salt. I think all the APIs are great. You know, the Claude APIs, the GPT APIs, you know, I use the Llama 3.1 APIs. Like LLMs are awesome. You know, just pick whatever one you want and start building is what I would say.
Nice. I'm so impressed with this amazing project. How do you integrate the front end with the back end, and what is the major language you use in deployment? So he's using Next.js for the full stack application, and so with Next.js you can build the front end and the back end in the same stack or the same repo, the same directory. And then for deployment, he's using Vercel. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Awesome.
Vanessa said she created an application while watching. Are you available for questions after the stream or anytime afterwards?
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to shoot me a DM at Netlope on Twitter. I'll just make this big. Yeah. Feel free to shoot me a DM. I'm more than happy to respond.
Nice. And finally, is there anything else you want to share with the folks? Anything you want to say?
No. All I'll say is happy building. You know, I get so much joy out of building these things, and I try to encourage other people to do the same. And you know, actually build your idea this weekend or next week or whatever. It's easier than most people think, and it's really fun. So
yeah, actually build your idea. That's a word for me too. Actually build the idea. Don't just write it down and forget about it. Actually build it. Well, thank you so much, Hassan, for coming on today. It's been amazing. Be sure to follow Hassan on Twitter. Be sure to follow Hassan on Twitter at Nutlo. And you can find the LlamaCoder repository here on the screen, github.com/nutlope/LlamaCoder, and go forth and build your MVP applications and go ahead and iterate on it and publish it so we can all see it. Thanks so much for being here. This has been an amazing stream. It's been so great to talk to you. And I guess I will see you on the internet, Hassan.
100%. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.